Hey everyone, and welcome to this week's devlog for Seagull Team 6, the mobile game that I'm making and challenging myself to finish within 1 month. I'm going to go through and talk about the progress I made this week, and then at the end I'm going to give an update on where the project's at, whether I was able to finish it or think I'll be able to finish it in 1 month, and what the plans are going forward. As a side note, we've recently started a community Discord both for these devlogs and the other tutorials I'm doing, so the link to that is in the video description and I'll also post it in a comment. So I'd love to have you join that and we can talk about the game or give any suggestions or feedback you may have. And if you're following along with my tutorials, it's also a great place for you to ask questions about those, easier for me to respond and help out as needed. So would love to have you join the Discord, link below in the description. I spent the first couple days of last week adding some polish to the way that bullets work. I wanted to give myself a good platform going forward to add different kinds of behaviors to projectiles so that certain projectiles could be homing missiles or lock on or do some other interesting things. And so I had to do a fair amount of refactoring to the way bullets work now. And what I did is I added a behavior node that each bullet can take in, and you can just compose it by dragging a certain predefined behavior onto your bullet, and this will change how the bullet moves and behaves. And so right now they're all pretty standard, most of them just go straight, but it's going to be really easy going forward to add homing modes or some other interesting things in the future. Besides adding behaviors for bullets, I also added some muzzle flash effects to all of our enemy guns when they get fired, and I think this was a small change that just added a lot of polish. It just feels better now because of it. So there's a big smoke poof that appears whenever you fire or whenever a rocket is fired, and there's also gun muzzle flash that comes up, and it's different depending on whether it's a rifleman or a sniper or different types of enemies. And then, speaking of different types of enemies, also early in the week I started working on adding new enemy varieties. So there were two big ones I wanted to add this week just to give some kind of a difference between enemies. The first was a rocket enemy, and so they move slower but have more health, and they fire a pretty slow moving rocket that kind of has a smoke trail behind it. And this rocket, all the projectiles in this game do 1 damage to you, but this rocket moves a little bit slower, and so it actually is kind of difficult because they'll hang around longer, and they have slightly bigger collision radiuses than other projectiles, and so it's kind of a bigger obstacle that kind of moves around slower that you have to dodge, and so it adds a little bit of a variety to the types of bullets that you're moving and trying to avoid. On top of that, I also added a sniper enemy, and no lie, this is one of my favorite things that I've made in this game so far. So the sniper also moves really slow and doesn't have a ton of health, but their bullets move really quickly, so much faster than any of the other types of bullets, and I think they just have a really cool feel to them. And so adding these two enemies in actually meant that I had encounters that had some variety, that were different, that felt good. And as part of this, I actually designed a fair amount of extra encounters that were randomly picked from. So now there's not just 1 or 2 encounters in the game, there's a whole host of pretty basic encounters with different unit types and mixes and ways that your enemies are going to spawn in as you play the game. And then later on in the week, on Wednesday and Thursday, I kind of already talked about this a little bit, but I decided to add bullet trails. So I just wanted to give a little bit more of a sense of motion to our enemy bullets, and I wanted them to stand out. I wasn't really happy about how I had upscaled bullets previously because it made the pixel art not look as great, which was already somewhat of a problem since they were being rotated a lot. So what I did to counter that was add a bullet trail that could be customized for each projectile as needed. And I think this turned out really well. Bullets now have a sense of motion, and they look like they're moving, they're easy to identify, and I think it's just a cool effect. And I'm really happy because the sniper bullet has a much longer and slightly more visible trail than regular rifle bullets, and so they just seem like they're moving faster. There's more weight to them, whereas our rockets have a more dark gray, blackish trail to them, so it looks kind of like smoke. And in the future, I'd like to further refine that and actually make it like smoke puffs or something, so it looks like the rocket is continually moving or adjusting course. But for now, I think this is a huge upgrade to what we had before, and the projectiles that the Seagull has to dodge actually feel like there's some weight, like they actually look good and feel good. And then my last project of this week was to add different behaviors for enemies, similar to how I had already done for bullets. The idea with this was that going forward, I was going to want to have a ton of variety with how enemies could behave, and I wanted it to be really easy to choose what type of behavior an enemy should have. So for example, I really wanted snipers that wouldn't really move, they would just be stationary, and I felt like this would offset some of the difficulty of dodging their really quickly moving bullets. And so this took a lot of work. It was a fair amount of refactoring to pull out a lot of the AI code and move it into its own behavior node that could just be composed directly onto enemies. But it turned out really well, and I'm really happy with it. And the nice thing is that you can define any type of behavior for even the same types of enemies. So you could have multiple snipers that each have different behaviors. Some could be moving, some could be stationary. You could have rocket people who just sit around, and some that are moving. So I think going forward, this is going to make it really easy to add a lot of variety to the game. On top of that, I also decided to start adding static enemies. So the only one I have right now is a sandbag, but I have some encounters where snipers or other units will sit behind the sandbag, and that way there's a little bit of extra difficulty for the player because they first have to get rid of the sandbag before they can actually attack the enemy. So there's just a lot more variety in the encounters you face and the enemies and the stuff that you're going to be going up against, and I think those give a much better feel to the game. Additionally, just because I've spent so much time polishing this week by adding bullet trails and muzzle flash, one other cool thing I wanted to do was add a laser sight effect to the sniper, so you kind of got a hint when it was about to attack. And this actually turned out really well. I just used a line 2D that's built into Godot that would just become less and less transparent as they were about to attack, and then it would just be a full red laser right before they shot. And I think it looks awesome. It really turned out well, and I think it's just a cool effect to give to the sniper. So that was mostly it for this week, and now I'll give you a demo of what the game looks like at the end of this week. So this is some footage from the game itself. You can see that there's the sandbags right now that you have to get rid of, and you can see that laser that appears from the sniper when they're attacking. Again, small stuff, but I think it just adds a ton of variety and feel to the game. And so if I restart right back up here since I died, you'll see that there's random encounters that spawn. I also decided to make the bullets smaller to just return them to their original state, like I mentioned. One, because it looks better, but two, I think I really needed to have this game embrace more of a bullet hell feel. So more bullets, but smaller, which gives you more skill, or allows for more skill from the player to dodge those bullets. And this is something I'm going to need to continue tweaking, especially to make the collision shape for the player much smaller. But I think this makes it feel a lot better, and it looks better too just by having a lot more and smaller bullets. And here you'll see a bunch of the rockets, and I added also notifications, so there's a 3-second timer when you start a mission and then a 3-second timer when a mission's over, just so that it's not just an instant transition from one to the other. And I think that added just a huge change to the game, and it makes it feel a lot better too. So yeah, as you can see, the full gameplay loop is there, and now there's actually cool stuff that you come up against, right? Like there's different encounters, different things to dodge, and it's cool because we have different enemies that have different health. You can actually see, your bullet damage and bullet speed coming into effect because there's different units you have to face. So I'm really happy with how it's turning out so far. The encounter system turned out to be a really great idea because now I've got something like this where you've just got a bunch of encounters that spawn, and it makes it so that levels are defined not by time, but by encounters and enemies. So this is what I have so far. I hope that this has been really interesting and cool for you to see. And now I'll talk a little bit about what the plans are going forward. So as I'm recording this, it's Sunday, June 28th, so we're almost a month from when I started this challenge. And the whole goal was to have a complete game by the time the month was over. It didn't have to be perfect or even that good. It just had to have a full gameplay loop, something that I theoretically could publish. And in one hand, I think we achieved that. There's an upgrade screen, there's a full game loop, you can restart, you can lose. There's not really a win condition or an end condition, but that's kind of the point of this endless mode. So in one hand, I think theoretically what we have here is publishable. That said, it's not very good, and there's still so much room for improvement. So on one hand, I'm a little disappointed I didn't get the goal, in the sense that I was hoping to truly have something I'd feel comfortable publishing to the store, or to the App Store, or the Play Store. But on the other hand, I've been really happy with the progress, especially since June has just been a busy month, and let's face it, no one wants to be working on code when you could be outside and when it's a nice summer day. So My plans are to continue working on this. I eventually want to add a story mode. I've got a ton of really cool ideas, I think, for ways to flesh this game out. But I do want to have an initial release of just the infinite mode. And in order to do that, I'm still going to need a fair amount more of just more content, really, more enemies and more encounters, and the progressive difficulty scaling isn't quite there yet, and I think that's a really important part that the game needs to have before I let people play it publicly, because right now there's just no, you get all these upgrades, but the game never gets harder or easier, and honestly it's kind of too hard right at the start right now. So more content in terms of variety of enemies, projectiles, behaviors, difficulty that gets harder over time. And then I just need some of the basics, like being able to save your progress whenever you leave. And I need to have some way of incorporating score over time. Right now your score just resets, which isn't what it should do. So just handling score better, having a main menu, just some of the polish like that. But I think the core game is pretty much there, and it just needs more stuff now, but the mechanics are gonna need some tweaking, but they're mostly done. So that's my update. I feel like I've mostly accomplished what I want, but there's still some stuff that needs to happen, especially like weapon upgrades and the special abilities that I was hoping to do. So still some things to come, and I'm hopeful that in this next month, as I'll be making the transition from full-time work to grad school, I'll hopefully have some more time to actually work on this game throughout the day rather than just for an hour or two in the mornings. So I'm really excited. I'm going to keep making devlogs every week and updating you guys all on my progress. And I hope to hear from you. I love any feedback or suggestions you may have. And yeah, thanks for watching. That's pretty much it for this, and I'll see you in the next video.